Hey guys, welcome back. Now it's time to get to the crown. Now before we do, I want to finish up our moldings so I can show you that. Now remember I told you how we glued the little wafer in? Well, I kind of did it a little bigger than what we need, so you definitely see how to do this. It's very simple. So let's take a look at that, and then we'll get it to our crown. Okay, obviously you can see I kind of left my wafer slightly large. And remember I told you to leave the little center point, because this is how we trim them down. We don't want to get too complicated. Now again, you don't have to leave that much, but I just want to emphasize. Take your same Forstner bit and drill it down. Little chisel cleanup, and we got a reinforced miter. That simple. Okay, can't get any easier than that, can it? Okay, now let's get to our crown. Now if you recall, I told you when we were doing this, if you've got a large, I've got a 12-inch chop saw, miter saw, whatever you want to call it. And as you're well aware, I glued up my crown in one piece. But I also told you if you didn't have a large chop saw, not to do that. Because your table saw is not going to be tall enough to cut this. But we can cheat a little bit if you got a 10-inch saw. So we're going to come back and look at this crown. Okay guys, what I've done is I've turned the case upside down. Now you don't have to do that. And I've got it sitting on some supports, just something to get it up off where I can slide my crown in and under and around. But this also gives a good camera angle where you can see. The other thing I've done is I've gone to my chop saw, miter saw, whatever you want to call it, and I've confirmed my angle is fitting my case. So we're good here. Now, to keep me oriented, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on my corner and I'm going to put my mark right at the corner and I'm going to put me a little scratch line to make sure I don't cut it in the wrong direction. You can do that pretty easy, you know. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fit this one corner. So I'm going to go to the chop saw and make my cut to start the crown. Okay, I've made my cut and I'm fitting well. I'm ready to go here. So what I'm going to do now, this is my critical one, because this is the one I got to have just right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my line, make my mark. Now the thing we have to remember, we're going to be cutting in this direction. But this is the point right here. This is our critical point where we're going to pass through right on the point. And that's also going to be the easiest point to see with the crown made up like this. Let's go to the chop saw and look at it. All right, with my chop saw at 22 at my angle, which is 22.5, I actually want to cut this just a little bit long. I don't want to cut it dead on the money on the first shot. So I'm just going to cut it. And here's the cool thing about the crown and this and the way this is glued up. I've got a straight edge that I index off of. It's just a straight chop. Except that I've got to just go my 22.5 degree angle is the only angle I got to worry about. All right, now I'm just going to ease in on my mark. sneak up on it. Now while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and cut the other angle. Okay, I'm fitted up and I'm looking nice. Wasn't difficult. I'm going to cut it off to length. Then I'm going to show you how I'm going to glue it. Then we're going to go look at some other ways. Okay guys, time to glue it. Now I'm not going to glue it on the case. Now I'm probably going to hear about this a little bit, but I'm not going to put a biscuit in there. Here's why. To clamp this is difficult. You got to rig up all kinds of things. Here's a little tip you can do. What you can do is set this in here, and when we clamp this, I'm going to be clamping it right here down to the bench. But what I can also do is take me some long screws, put them out here, partially in, because this is not going to be seen. All this is going to be hidden. Give me another one in here, right across from it. You already know what I'm going to do, don't you? Then when I clamp this, once I have it clamped, what I can do is I can come across that a little bit and get me a little bit of cross pressure, pull it up tight. Now you're thinking, okay, all he's going to do is do a butt joint on this. That's just not going to be tight enough. You're right, it's not. Remember that wafer thing? That just works all too nice. Once this is dry, this joint is dry, it's not going to be super strong, but it's going to be tight. We'll take all of this off, and then we can drill it, and we can put a larger wafer in there. Now comes the issue of our crown. How do we reinforce that? Back up underneath here, in here, you can do a lot of whittling and whatever and make you a little wooden caul, because that's not seen either, nor does it interfere. This top corner right here does. This is our fit point. But I'm going to tell you what, and I got this from an old piece of farm. I mean, this thing is really old. And what they did is they took a piece, they look like a piece of burlap. And oftentimes I'll just use a good heavy cloth, and I soak it in glue and fold it up 2 or 3 times, and I mash it up in there. Works sweet. Not pretty, but it reinforces that joint well. You can also drill it, you know, and run a little toothpick up in it or something, but you just don't need to. I'm going to glue this. All right, guys, you see what I got going on here. This crown's got a little bit of twist in it. Kind of one of the issues with having this stuff lay around. Anyway, and what I can see is I'm tight here, and I got just a little wee gap there. So what I'm doing is picking up on that, and it's going to ease me a little wedge in there. Once I get this joint tight, as well as that one, even if I got a little bit of twist to it, when it goes on the case, it'll pull itself back into position. So I'm not going to worry too much about that. This one's doing fine. It looks like it's my wax paper, I think, a little bit got up in that joint. I want to make sure it's right. I want to make sure I got enough glue too. If you take something apart like this, put a little bit more glue on there, because this end grain is going to soak it up. Now you can see the problem here. See where this has got a twist to it? That's another place this clamp's going to help me a lot. I'm reaching up in there pretty good. You know, something else can cause like this is, even though we've glued this, see I took that loose and I've loosened this one. Kind of a balancing act here to get everything together and let the glue set. All right, I'm tight there. I want some more glue in that. When you lose that initial glue tack, get some more glue in there. That suction from that glue will actually help hold it. And then once it sets and we get our reinforcements in there, it's not going anywhere. All right, I'm going to let it dry. Everything's getting tight. All right. Okay. Now here's the crown glued up. Now one of the things I want to talk to you about here is, you notice when I clamped this down on the bench, I got a little twist in it, so I had to use a little wedge. And I did my screw thing, and I pulled it, and one corner it wanted to pull away a little bit. So I had to clamp it to the bench and just shove everything up nice and tight. But it made a really nice joint. It's good and tight. Not an issue. But here's the thing I want to explain to you. So many woodworkers want you to give them, do exactly this, and it will work. That's not woodworking. That's not reality. Every piece of wood will behave a little bit differently. One of the things with this show is trying to teach you how to think on your feet, because you have to. Okay, now see, a lot of guys, when they found out they had a little twist in this crown, they'd have freaked out. Not the case, because when this goes up on top and it's pulled down, it's going to be just fine. Why did it twist? Who knows? We've got tiger maple, we got grain running across, we got curl running up and down. We've got it glued. It's set around a little bit from the time we did it till we film it. Who knows? It's wood. It does things that, well, it's kind of like a lot of people you know, me included. We do a lot of things that, you know, after we've done it, we're kind of like, what was I thinking? Well, wood kind of does that too. So you have to learn to improvise. Think a little bit outside the box to make things work. Now, with that said, let's go now and look. Remember I told you guys, if you had a big chop saw, and now I've got a 12-inch and it cut this just fine. But see, you're not going to be able to cut it on a 10-inch blade, on a 10-inch table saw, because the max it's going to cut is 3 inches. 2 7/8 on a lot of them. And see, right now you're at about 3 1/8. So you would not have cut this on a table saw. You'd have gotten close, and yeah, you could have cut it and then taken a little back saw and just trimmed what little bit it didn't get. But what I want to show you is the alternative. Now, the alternative to this is to simply cut your flat board, your very top. Cut it and miter it. Exactly like we did the moldings. No difference. They're just bigger. You know, put it on, set your angle. Okay, the same one you've been using all the way through, and you simply miter this to fit the case. Now, you got to be careful here, because your fit is going to be determined by how much. See, this is our case right here. This is where it's going to go against the case. Now, when I check this, I'm at 2 13/16. You might be a little bit different, and that's okay. But what we want to do is make sure that we have enough space from this point out to overhang, and so that we have room to get the crown in. And as I recall, but I'll double check here, this is 5 inches. But, you know, again, if you cut that piece and you have a little deviation, or you route the profile and it don't come out just right, and you got to trim that, and it's 4 7/8 or 4 3/4, and you've got enough room for it to set up on top of there, you're fine. Don't get in a panic. You know, it's going to work just fine. Okay, so let's understand. Just miter the board that sits on top. Miter it and get it to fit. Set it on top of the case. You know, you can reach in here and put a clamp on it and make sure you're even out here going around your case. Now you can fit the crown. Now, cutting the crown is the exact same setup, except, now, a lot of you guys know this, but there's a lot of new guys. You can try to set this on 22 1/2, and then try to set your back angle and all of these things. What a pain. What is it, guys? It's 31.65 or something to make that, except, no, that's on a 40, that's if you're doing the 45. Anyway, here's the fastest, slickest way to do it. Use your miter gauge. Make sure you've got a tall fence. If you don't, screw one on. And set this crown on exactly like you're going to be cutting it. No different. Exactly like it's going to set on the case. In other words, what I'm telling you is make sure that when you set this up against that, you're not like this. You're setting dead on your flat of the 45 you cut. Make sure you're flat down here. Then cut it. Because this is what that does is just automatically sets your it sets your angle. Except we got a problem. I'm in the wrong direction. And I'm making a big emphasis over this so you get this. When you cut this, let me show it to you. If I cut it the problem is my side angle is angled out, and I need it to angle in so that my piece fits. So what I have to do is I have to change direction. Now, let's watch what happens. Now here's the other place you have to be careful. Watch this though. Now I'm in the right, now I'm cut right. But my long point, which is my top, the upper point right here, is when I make the cut, it's on the bottom. It's down on the fence, down on the saw to get it right. Okay, to cut the opposing corner and your other side, I had to switch miter gauges because I got that metal fence and I really don't want to put that into my saw blade. But this is what, on a table saw, that's what will give you your cut. Now when you cut this, make sure the piece you take off the end, make sure you've got enough that when you go to fit this, you're not going to have an issue. You got enough length. See what I'm showing you? I can't hold all this one time by myself, but anyway, it fits. Now I want to go to the chop saw and show you an alternative method, and one I think is a whole lot better. Okay, using this method, you can do it with a 10 or even an 8-inch. I think you can do it with an 8, yeah, you can do it with an 8-inch chop saw. Again, simply set the crown, the exact same thing we did on the table saw, to where it's setting just like it will on the case. But again, your long point is always going to be at the bottom. And see, this would set on the case just like that, long point to the top. Then I can, just by moving back and forth, I can get my other angles a whole lot easier. Now you see what I'm showing you? What you got here, if you do it the opposite way, again, see how this angle is always wrong? Make sure you take some scrap, guys. Make sure you take some scrap and play with it, because you can mess it up in a hurry. All right, again, what you want to do, let me just get a piece here to work with. I want to re-emphasize to you, what you want to do is a good idea for you would be to take just a piece of wood, same width as your crown, just a scrap, and when you cut your 45s on your crown, to cut an extra piece. Just cut a piece of scrap. It doesn't have to be coved and all that. And practice with it just a little bit to get a feel for your angles. Because they're not hard to mess up. See what you got? Then, to get your angle the same over here, it's just it's the same exact setup. See, just make sure you don't get your, just make sure you don't get your short side and long sides messed. Now, cut the other side, obviously, this will be the way it would set. Obviously, this is not going to work. You're going to have a left and you're going to have a right. Okay, so to get this, we got to go the opposite direction. That means I can move it, but let me see here. Yeah, I got to go to the other side to get it. I got to flip it. See, I got to think about it. I got to flip it, and then I got to come this direction. Now I'm standing back out of the way, so you can see this. Can you see this? And this isn't the safest way to do this thing. You can clamp it right here if you want, but I'm out of the way. Normally, if I'm in front of this, I've got a good grip and I'm in control. I'm a little bit not quite that way here, so don't you do this. And that gives you the other side. Whatever it is on the ground. Okay. So just take your time. Get a feel for it. You definitely got a left and a right. Cutting crown. Not hard. Just got to think about it a little bit. Stay focused on what you're doing. And again, that scrap piece to play with a little bit, that's a pretty good idea. I know. You know, if anything out there, I can cut miters just perfect. As long as I can stay oriented in my brain whether I need to flip it or flop it. And that flipping and flopping thing can get kind of tough. And the next thing you know, if you flipped instead of flopped, then you come back to that link thing. And when you got to change from a flip to a flop, then the length ain't right. Did y'all get that? I hope so. Crowns. Let's go make some drawers. Okay, guys, it's time to get to the drawer. But before I do, I want to show you the crown. It's finished up. And what I did is I just took a piece of that burlap, and you can see in there just what I did is just soaked it in glue, put it up there in that corner to reinforce it, and as well you can see the little wafers put in there. Really makes a strong joint. I realize it's not real pretty in there, but once it's up on top of there, nobody's going to see it. So only me and you know it's there. But it does make a good way to reinforce something's not seen that's kind of on an odd angle like that. All right, the drawer. Now what I've done, all I did was take two pieces of wood, and I think these are about 15/16, something to bridge this space, to give me a drawer runner. Because I want the drawer to run on the grain running the same direction. Now when we're done, all we'll do is screw this down in some, we'll use an 1/8 inch screw and some 1/4 inch holes. Just something, an 1/8 inch meaning the size of the screw itself, and then the head, of course, is bigger. Just to screw this down, and that'll let our wood expand and contract. We don't want to glue it down. We just don't need to. Then I've dovetailed this drawer. Now, I thought about this long and hard about what I was going to do when it came to dovetailing the drawer. You know, about everybody out there has got some kind of jig. So whatever jig you've got or ever how you want to dovetail them, do it. But I'm going to show you a little bit on how to do some hand cuts. And I'm also going to show you how to cheat a lot. Okay, you just ain't got to tell nobody, but we're going to cheat a bunch. All right. Now, one of the things we want to notice with a dovetail joint or drawer, we want a half pin at the bottom, full pin, half pin. Now, this drawer, those three dovetails is all it needs. Now, one of the things I did, my drawer is made out of hard maple. This is what if you guys have got doors and drawers or been around watching me at all, you know I make drawers just a little different than anybody else. We're actually going to do an applied front across this. So my inside front, because I want it to look like a solid piece and I want it to look like a half blind, this is tiger maple. The sides and back are just hard maple. You could do it out of whatever you want. You know, you could do the whole thing out of tiger maple. But the other thing you want to do is you want to make sure you keep your pins just a little bit proud. Now what I do is I cut my drawer pretty much to an exact width, meaning I try to fill the gap pretty good. But also, if you look right here, I want a little space in here. Now at the time we're filming this, we're filming this in late December, and there's heat on it, so our humidity is way down. And the wider the drawer, you know, if this was an 8-inch drawer, I'd probably leave a good solid 1/8 inch, maybe even just a little bit more gap in here, because this drawer is going to expand and contract a little, but not much. So I've got a good strong, let's see what I got here. I got a good strong 16, but that's enough. So now what I'm going to do, let me see if I can turn this thing around. Now the way this is going to happen, so you know, is what we're going to do, we're going to put our drawer together, glue it up, get it square. Now here's the neat thing I like about doing the applied front. If we make a mistake on this drawer, we can go back and make another drawer or make a correction. Now I've already got the piece of wood selected. It's going to be our drawer front. We did the chatoyance thing and did all that. So we've picked out what's going to be our drawer front. It's going to be thin, so we're going to be resawing this. But what I want is I want this front to fit nice and flat. Now in later shows where we're doing different cases and things like that, low boys, tables, whatever, where we have more drawers, then you'll see how this really works nice. Because what I can do, once I'm set in here, I can actually wedge this drawer in place. I can come in here and sand, hand plane, do whatever I need to do to make sure that this interface is perfectly flat and level to my case. So that when we apply the front to it, it fits like a glove. And again, in the event, now you'll see all of this, but in the event something goes wrong, I have an out. Now this piece of tiger maple right here is not part of this log set. And we're going to do an overlay drawer, meaning the drawer actually is going to lip over the opening. Pretty much the way corner cabinets were done. You can do it flush. Flush meaning you have the defined line around it and the drawer goes flush in the opening. In other words, this is a flat face. We're going to do an overlay. Now let's go, but the biggest thing with the drawer is dovetailing. Now let's go look at how you cheat and make hand-cut dovetails. Okay, the dovetail we're going to do is a 10 degree. Now you can see where I've laid it out. I've got, this is about 1/8 of an inch, that's about 1/4 on each half pin. And then in the middle, I want my small part of my dovetail to be about 1/8 of an inch. Now, let's talk about that a minute. A lot of jigs and a lot of things out here will use a 14 degree. That's a big wide bit. A lot of splay on it. You go back and look at the really fine dovetails of the old craftsmen. These are the ones that everybody aspires to. And if you look at them, they're smaller necks, thin, narrower pins. And one of the reasons we have to hand cut them is because there's no real way to do them with a router. The bit's too small. Well, maybe. but we'll talk about that later. But right now, what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to cut our dovetails. Now you can I'm doing a symmetrical dovetail. And again, just lay it out. Now, a couple calls will help you do that. Having something that's cut, that's a notch like this, that's cut on the angle that you want, really helps you to be able to lay it up here and draw it out and get it equal. Again, my spacing is just, this center dovetail is dead in the center. And you can see right here, that makes for a pretty good looking dovetail. Now, you've seen me talk about this time and time again. One of the things you want to do is you want a marking gauge that will give you a cut line. You see my scribe line right here? That's what you want. You want a cut line, not a scratch. You want a nice, clean cut. Okay. Once you've got this laid out, always have your little scrap wood for setup and for testing. You want to cut your line. Now what your line is, what this line is, that's the thickness of this wood plus just a little teeny bit to let it protrude so we can sand them off, because sanding that end grain is what gives us that nice definition and gives us a nice look. Okay, now here's where people have issues, when they have to start hand sawing. Now, the other thing is having a set of cawls like this makes for a really nice little deal, because you can hold them, clamp them, and it makes for a really nice little saw guide that allows you to track right down the side and keep your saw vertical. Having a really good saw is important, and really good saws are not cheap. But can we do anything different? Let's take a look. Okay, guys, get up on the edge of your seat, turn the volume up, and pay real close attention. Here's what I got. I've got a miter gauge that's got just a fence I screwed onto it, a little piece of 1/4-inch plywood on the bottom. And I've got it set at my 10 degrees. Now again, I took a cawl, cut it at 10 degrees, and just making sure it's right. Now all we're going to do with this is we're going to use a router bit to take out the meat. So is this a hand-cut dovetail? Well, I've got to push this through here with my hand. I don't know if it qualifies or not, so we just won't tell. Now, make you a pass through here, just as I've done, to cut you a track, because your track is your index point. Then, and pay attention to your angle, which way it's going, because we're going to have to move this jig in a minute to cut. It will only cut one side, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But now the other thing, the scribe line, make sure your bit is set to the depth. And remember I told you, always have your little scrap piece to double check that depth. Make sure you're hitting right on your scribe line. Now that scribe line will also help you whether you're doing a hand cut or you're doing a jig cut. Because what that cut line does is it helps prevent tear out. Now, clamp it in place. You see what I'm doing? I'm doing it wrong. I got to get over here because my angle's coming this way. And what I'm indexing off of now is the fat side of the pin. I'm about to mess it up, so don't you, be careful. Play with this a little bit, okay? Clamp it in place. Don't try to hold it, because the rotation of the bit can cause you to pull yourself off a little bit and run it. Then move to your other one that the angle is the same on, which is, now common sense says that you would go through and do all of your pieces before you move the gauge or the. Now, as you can see, I can make a really finite little cut doing that. Now, I could just flip the gauge. If I do that, I'm going to cut a V out of my gauge. I'm going to cut a V out of my fence. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply move the fence a little bit. Just so I've got a separate point. Okay. Now I want to cut the groove. No, I don't. I want to move it. Sorry about that. Now I got to switch angles. All right. Now I want to run the groove. I might need to take a little, I'm going pretty fast here, so I might need to take a little chisel and clean that up, but you can cut them just perfect. Cool. Let me clean them up just a little bit. One thing I forgot to mention is make sure that your bit and your jig and everything are nice and vertical, 90 degrees. All right, fat side in. Now we go to the bandsaw. Leave the line. Now you notice what I did. I ran in to kind of clean that middle one out. Now I need to clean that up just a little bit with a chisel right to my line. Always go from both sides. That's going to ensure you the cleanest, crispest cut you're going to get. Any questions? Now, over there, what I did, because I want to show you, see that little gap in this? Don't freak out. Little thin piece of veneer. And this is just usually, and the way you make these, if you need to, is take it off the left side of the blade. In other words, just run it through the table saw, and this is just your scrap. Glue it in. When you sand and finish that, no one will know. And what you just saw, we did in real time. Actually, we had to move the cameras and whatever. So, hand cut dovetails. Okay, guys. When we come back, what we're going to do is we're going to glue up our drawer. We're going to make our drawer bottom, and we're going to resaw and put our front on. Then we go to the last part of the construction, the doors. Saving them for last. Then we're ready to get to the finishing. We got to get through them doors first. I want to make sure you got doors down pat. Yeah, I know. Very nice. See you later.